Good evening. My name is Nicola Tollin. I'm UNESCO Chair on Urban Resilience at the University of Southern Denmark, and I'm chairing this official side event this evening. Thank you very much, first of all, to being here, a bit late and after quite a long and intense day. Without any further ado, I would like to thank very much all the co-organizing institutions that have been collaborating in putting up this event, focusing on raising the ambition of urban climate action through multi-level governance. We will have quite an impressive number of panelists and speakers this evening that I'm very happy to welcome here to the. If you can go to the next, please. This, yes. The session today will be divided in 3 different panels. We will start with a series of presentations to set the floor, and after we will have 2 discussion. The first one will be with the representative of the Ministry of Climate of Estonia, the Ministry of Environment of Sri Lanka, and the Research Council of Norway and Science Europe, together with the representative of the Assembly of Zagreb and member of the Committee of the Region of the European Union. This will be followed by a second discussion that will be bringing together 4 UN agencies and programs, including UNESCO, UNDP, UN Environment, UN Habitat, and our colleague from University of Venice. The focus, again, it's very simple. It's to try to figure out how to bring together local climate action and national climate policies, and through this collaboration to raise mutual ambitions for climate. I would like to start to set a bit the ground to a work that we have been realizing in collaboration with UN Habitat since 2017, trying to understand what there is for cities in the national climate policies. Again, we reiterated this analysis for many years. The latest one that you can see in this front page with the QR code was launched during the United Nations Climate Conference in a summer session in Bonn in June this year, and portray the latest in-depth analysis of the NDCs, which results are important to set the ground for today. We've been clustering the NDC in strong, moderate urban content and no urban content. The results show that 27% of the NDCs are prioritizing cities. 39% are mentioning cities, but there is still a 35% that doesn't mention cities at all. All in all, though, considering also that the moderate urban content is not always particularly strong, we have a space of opportunity with over 73% of NDCs that have space and need to strengthen the inclusion of cities in the forthcoming NDCs that are in preparation in this very moment. Just to highlight a few key facts you can see here at urban level regarding climate mitigation, what there is for cities with the number of NDC mentioning it, regarding both the identification of challenges in the solid line and in the dashed line, the identification of actions to respond to these challenges. Clearly, without no surprise, energy, for example, and water are among the key sectors that are mentioned together with transport and built environment. We have a similar picture regarding adaptation. can go to the next, please. Yes. Where the sector most mentioned are regarding water and infrastructures. But again, as you can see, the number of NDCs that are actually mentioning this, identifying these challenges and identifying action is still rather limited. So there is a lot of potential and a big need to do things in the next round. Next, please. One other key issue that I would like to highlight is this yellow graph here at the bottom, where we identify which NDC are looking specifically at urban climate hazards. Again, the numbers are even lower. Here, the comparison is between national level with the solid line and urban level with the dashed line. At the national level, the identification of climate hazard is very strong, but at urban level is still lacking, majorly lacking. Without this, it's not possible to have a coherent baseline against which to measure any type of development at urban level. And we do know that in many cases, many cities are lacking information regarding this baseline. It's a very important point. Another important point is the top right graph showing the request at national and at urban level for finance, technology, and capacity building. And there is very few, only 26 NDCs that are actually determining what is their needs in terms of urban climate finance. Without identifying these needs, it's very difficult. They're going to get access, cities are going to have access to appropriate resources to continue this work. Next, please. Yes. Now, my apologies for this little ambush for our invited speaker from Sri Lanka and Estonia. In this report, we've been publishing data from all the 194 countries we analyzed. And here you can see a national at urban level by sector for mitigation and adaptation, identification of challenges and responses in both countries. This allows me to say that the fact that there is not urban content in one country doesn't mean that in that country there is not any local climate action. But it's important to highlight why do we need cities included in NDCs. The reasons are two. One, the action of cities in the NDCs are fundamental to raise the national policy ambition. Many cities are doing even more than what is done at national level. The inclusion of cities can raise the national ambition. That's a fundamental principle of the Paris Agreement. Second, the inclusion of NDCs is fundamental in order to identify what are the needs of cities in terms of capacity, in terms of institutional framework, technology, and finance that are needed in order to implement local action. This case, sorry to single out, but in future, with future hope and positive hope regarding the European Union that is presenting overall an NDCs by consensus that's common for all 27 countries, with the hope that the next round will include also cities in a more strong manner. There are hopes, and we will really like to see this happen. Next, please. Now I would like to close mentioning also the continuation of this type of work with a number of other collaboration we've been having on urban climate action with a series of policy brief published with the Global Green Growth Institute, work that we've been doing in the region of southern Denmark, work we're doing currently with the Global Covenant of Mayors for Energy and Climate and UN Habitat and Urban Climate Finance, and looking at the future third assessment report on climate change in cities by the Urban Climate Change Research Network. But most importantly, I would like to highlight two of the upcoming works, one with UNESCO Intergovernmental Hydrological Program, looking specifically at water, in the NDCs, and another one with UN Habitat, launching new guidelines in order to support the decision-making and the preparation of the new NDCs. These guidelines will be launched in the preliminary form during this COP and finalized in January next year in order to give concrete support to countries next future. Now, the question for you before passing to other speaker is the following. Which are the concrete actions to make this integration of local climate actions with national climate policies? How do we enable this multi-level governance? We know the issues, we know the challenge. What do we start with? Thank you very much. And now I would like to invite here on stage our next speaker. Our next three speakers will give insight through also practical work they've been doing around the world. And we will start with Dr. Senaka Basnayake, that's Director of Resilience at the Asian Disaster Preparedness Center. Dr. Senaka, please, the floor. And this, I think.
Is it working? Yep.
Yes. And if we can.
Yeah. Thank you, Nicola. Good evening to all of you. So when we talk about urban resilience, we often link to floods, cyclones, associated storm surges, strong winds, and so forth. But very seldom we talk about drought, how it affects to urban resilience. So I'm going to talk about South Asian drought risk management strategy, which ADPC has been developing, and linking to how that helps to improve urban climate actions. So yesterday, WMO launched the Climate Status Report 2024 here at COP29. And so we took the red alert. So the 2024, this year is going to be the hottest year on record. It was the last year. As warming temporarily hits the 1.5 degree. What does it mean that, so during January to September this year, the average temperature, global surface temperature is 1.54, which crosses the 1.5 of the limit that we were talking about IPCC report. So that is only for this year. But the good thing is, if you take the decadal average, it's still below 1.5. So we have little hope to have this, the warming well below 2 degrees, if not 1.5. So, so some of the key messages yesterday report actually here, it says that, past 10 years, the warmest, the years on record, as well as the Antarctic seal ice is the second lowest in the record. So this contributes to to further have extreme events. And of course, that would affect to the economies and on. So this is the climate signal that we are facing, the globally, as well as it affects the countries as well as the urban context. On the other hand, the urbanization, so you can see this the map. Of course, this was a little bit old though, from UNDESA 2019. So the prediction to the future, 2050, you can see that the map itself. So the more than 50% of the population, global population, will be in urban settings. So you can see the projections. So Asia is way above, triple of the other regions, maybe more than 3 billion or so. So these are some of the challenges that we have been facing. So at the same time, as of last year, you can remember that how we have achieved the SDG goals. We have been it is far behind. So when it comes to 11, that is related to sustainable cities and committees. So it's also not progressing well. It's kind of overall 13% nearly. And the bad thing is of course, the climate action, that is SDG 13, is even regressing. So these are some of the things that we have seen around us. And therefore, there's a need for us to work on the improving urban resilience in globally as well as regionally. So ADPC, as in Disaster Preparedness Center, which is an autonomous international organization. We have been functioning in the region more than 3 decades. with the vision safer communities and sustainable development through disaster risk reduction. So ADPC, we have a strong portfolio about this, climate, urban resilience. Over the last 2 decades, we have been having that, activities in the region. So you can see that very recently we developed a urban resilience framework at ADPC. So it is guided by 3 principles: science, systems, and applications. Of course, it is very much linked to all global agendas, new urban agenda, SFDRR, SDGs, as well as Paris Agreement, climate agreement. So the right-hand side of the slide, you can see that some of the interventions, the domains that ADPC, we are thinking of working in the countries. So starting with the risk understanding, climate risk, disaster and climate risk assessment, of course, improving just warning and forecasting. Not only that, actually linking to impact with forecasting and warning. So then improving risk governance, community resilience, risk-informed planning, as well as risk-informed the financing, the unlocking financing. So we are trying to help the cities, the countries. So with that, actually, I'm trying to little bit talk about the strategy that drought risk management strategy that we have been developing, which is supported by UNCCD. And we started early this year. So we are going to launch this the strategy at COP16 UNCCD, which is next month on 10th December. So which is on Resilience Day. So this is basically to improve the resilience in the countries so that they can take sort of move from reactive approaches to proactive approaches, as well as improve the technical and institutional capacity in countries. So we followed the process in this, to develop this. Of course, we did sort of we did some assessment of what are the countries that they have in the national drought policies and strategies, as well as what other regions are having, as well as the country consultation. That's a lengthy process we followed. So how it helps to improve the sort of urban resilience and to support the climate action, urban climate actions. So it's basically develop and so to help develop the countries, their national drought plans. So Nicola was also highlighting the importance of having national as well as subnational governance. And of course, this assist cities and urban areas understanding drought risk, the risk understanding, and then of course to help maybe support revisit their master plans if they have any to be more risk sensitive. Of course, to help develop the adaptation strategies as plans to climate, the urban settings. So you have 1 minute. So, and then of course, and then water resource management in the watersheds, as well as which supports the water supply and raise awareness among communities. This is the last slide, by the way. So improve urban food security by promoting effective water management practices. Of course, for urban, farming, which is coming in the big way, as well as, of course, working on NBS solutions, and then support cities unlocking financing, city authorities and municipal counties unlocking financing for climate actions, as well as having sort of good monitoring and evaluation process to understand the impact of climate, drought in climate settings. So with that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Senaka. I would like to invite our next speaker, Dr. Colin, from that's Senior Research Fellow, University of Sheffield. Thank you very much for being here with us, Colin, and the floor is.
Thank you very much, Nicola. It's a pleasure to be here. Today I'll be talking about the imperfect project. I guess that's what all academic projects are, but this one actually links to the name Implementing Effective and Just Net Zero Policies. This was funded by the British Academy's Net Zero Governance Programme, and so we looked at how national policy making translates into local climate action. So this feeds into what Nicola mentioned earlier, that in the UK, climate action isn't actually mentioned or hardly mentioned in the NDC. Yet this here's a case study to see how this actually works out in practice if it's not mentioned at the NDC level. And I think the UK is quite instructive in this space. So what does national policy making play? What role does national policy making play in the practice of net zero delivery at a local level? So first of all, I need to talk about the UK multi-level governance framework. So the UK multi-level governance framework is quite messy because the UK has not lost a war in quite a long time. So it has an additive system whereby you have a national government, you have a couple of subnational governments where you have Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland, but then you also have recent additions like combined authorities, which are here at the top left with the blue arrow pointing towards them, which have just emerged in the last 10 years. And then you have local authorities at the local level, which are the lowest administrative unit, which has tax raising and spending capacity. Combined authorities are relatively recent, so they don't actually have any assets, and they have no tax raising no tax raising capacity, but some tax spending capacity. And we analysed the climate action plans of 12 local authorities and of 2 combined authorities in the UK. So the 12 local authorities are the constituents of the combined authorities. And we followed an iterative process. So first of all, this is what the climate action plans look like. Because there isn't a national requirement for local authorities to develop climate action plans, these climate action plans are highly variable. Some of them are beautiful, glossy magazines. Some of them are just Excel spreadsheets. And vary hugely in terms of content, ambition, and so on. So we coded them in vivo to create comparability, and we followed an iterative process. So we here on the right side, you can see like the number of codes and so on. So we have a total about like 53 codes, and some of them have over 1,000 separate mentions in them. So quite a detailed process. So what we found out was, so here on the right-hand side, we have the priority areas at national government level. Then in the middle, we have the priority areas at combined authority level. And on the left-hand side, we have the priority areas of local authority level. So unsurprisingly, at national level, we have quite a strong focus on electricity supply, networks and storage, because this is linked to energy security. And this is where governments see the main leverage in addressing net zero. As you can also see, there's a focus on heat, which in the UK has recently risen up the policy agenda, and transport. I mean, these are the key areas where we'd expect government to act upon climate change. There's also buildings at the top and business and industry, which pretty much cover about 80% of UK carbon emissions. Now, at a more local level and at the combined authority level, we actually see, for example, much greater emphasis on nature and much more emphasis on transport, but, for example, a lot less emphasis on heat. This is something to do with the fact that they don't really control much of a building stock, so they more play like a strategic role. And then at a local level, instead, we see a very strong focus, for example, on public estates and services. This is because they have this aforementioned tax raising and spending capacity. So there's very different emphasis in the different climate action plans in terms of priority areas. Now, another thing we looked at in our research was the policy translation. So what kind of policy mechanisms are specifically mentioned? So at national level, we can see that, so this is from the UK's carbon budget delivery plan, that the policies mentioned to deliver the UK's carbon budget are mainly around grants and funds. So it's providing competitive support. Then it's about regulation, legislation, standards, such as minimum energy efficiency standards and the ban for non-fossil fuel powered cars by 2035, for example. And of course, strategy. That's what national government's role is. At the same time, we can see some emphasis also on public and capital expenditure. Now, interestingly, at combined authority level, there is no mention at all of public and capital expenditure, again, because they don't actually have the fiscal capacity to raise funds and spend them either. Whereas at a local level, this plays a much more significant role. And as we can see, the more we kind of trickle down to the local level, the more important grants and funds become. This is because in the UK, there's a very competitive environment where local authorities need to apply for grants and funds to do anything to do with climate change, or they have a bit of wiggle room with the public and capital expenditure, but they don't actually have a mandate or a statute to do anything about net zero. So this is additional to what they need to do according to statute anyway. So just the final slide now to conclude. So to improve the policy translation process, of course, would be useful if the UK mentioned urban areas within the NDC as a starting point. But then it would also be useful to provide more certainty around grants and funds allocation, would be useful to provide more certainty around regulation standards and stop flip-flopping and, first of all, establishing regulations and abandoning them later. And finally, would also be useful to diversify policy instruments in general used to accelerate local delivery, and specifically would make sense to focus on areas such as procurement and planning, where local actors have much greater capacity to determine what's appropriate at a local level than other policy mechanisms. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Colin. And now I would like to introduce our next speaker, Manav from the Sant'Anna School for Superior Studies. Please, Manav, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I would like to start my presentation with the disclaimer that I'm presenting my presentation on behalf of my professor who couldn't join for some personal reasons. So there are some limitations that I can share in this project as a non-person working in this project. So please pardon the information that I share, and also a little bit of my nervousness because it's a big shoes to fill. So I'm going to talk about one of the projects that my professor is leading in Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna, where I'm working as a researcher. It's about regional and inter-regional projects for climate resilience in one of the Italian region called Emilia-Romagna, north of Italy. And this project is basically talks about the importance of regional climate initiatives and how the regional climate initiatives go up to the national climate plans of a country. So it's one of the initiatives where good initiatives are coming forward from the regional point of view and taking forward to the national climate action plan. And it basically about coastal and regional ecosystem which are vulnerable to climate change, requiring resilient strategies. And regional projects play a vital role in promoting sustainable solution and involving local communities. And the project name is called Amirare. And this is about enhancing coastal ecosystem resilience in Italian region, which the main objectives basically are sustainable coastal management and implementing strategies to support long-term ecosystem health. And also effectiveness of nature-based solution, which trailing to protect coastal areas, ecological beach modeling, and how all these things are interrelated to climate action plans of Italy. And basically, the general project details about it's the overall project of European Union, which is called Interag, and this is what our university has allocated the funds. Not so related, but yeah, but good to know. Like, okay, this is how much money is being spent, which we're gonna talk about later, like how money is being spent in regional or national adaptation projects too. And this project is not only about setting up adaptation strategies, but it's also about setting carbon neutrality of a region by 2050, and which started with this project basically about the pathway to carbon neutral before 2050 aligned with the Pact for Work for Climate. And there are sector-specific target that covers energy, transport, environment, construction, industry, research, and innovation. And this project also talks about the commitment of ongoing improvement from the regional point of view and how it's piling up to the national strategies of Italy. And with the collaborative efforts from public and, sorry, it's not working. Oh yeah. It requires like the close collaboration with the local government, business, research, and our university, which is like one of the main stakeholders involved in this project, and emphasizes the need for global political action and community level involvement. And projects like this are critical because once you interact with the local stakeholders And once local stakeholders are consulted equally, they have better chances to project at the national level, and national governments are well equipped to understand the local community needs. So yes, and if you have any question, sorry, please write to Professor Frey and also to me in case you have any question about this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manav. Now, I would like again to thank our speakers and to invite to the stage our next panelist. I would like to invite here Ms. Laura Ramelgas, Director General of Climate Department and Minister of Climate of Estonia. I would like to call also Mr. Lira Rendeni, Director of Climate Change Secretariat at the Minister of Environment of Sri Lanka. Josko Kilsovic, President of the City Assembly of the Municipality of Zagreb and member of the Committee of the Region of the European Union. And Mari Sundeltevit, that's Chief Executive of the Research Council of Norway and also President of Science Europe. Thank you very much for being here with us. And last but not least, I would like to call on stage Patrizia Gragnani, that's a researcher at UNESCO Chair on Urban Resilience, that will moderate the question at the session.
Thank you, Nicola, and welcome to our panelists. So I would like to ask a question to Laura Ramelgas as a representative of Estonia here on this panel. So what are the priorities for Estonia's climate action? And could you please briefly describe the multi-level governance processes that led to Estonia's national climate plan?
Good afternoon. Estonia is currently in an interesting place with developing its climate policy. We are in the final stages of developing our climate resilient economy act, and it will go a step further even than our current climate plan. We have already 2021 set national target to become climate neutral by 2050. And this climate act will give a trajectory for different sectors and different governance levels, how to move towards climate neutrality, giving concrete targets and also goals for public sector, especially how to move, with what space, and what are the roles of different levels. But to bring out the main targets in our currently planned climate policy, it's first of all to be mentioned that we tackle our climate policy maybe in a novel way, merging climate ambition with economic changes, because we see that without economy, it's difficult to achieve those targets. As a backbone in our climate policy and moving towards climate neutrality is, of course, energy. We come from the history of high greenhouse gas emissions level from energy sector, and we have a set goal to produce 100% of electricity domestically consumed in Estonia from renewables by 2030. Another important aspect is giving advantage to clean and green technologies. And there is important role both at state level and local level to really push forward this development. So we won't lose our competitiveness while moving towards climate neutrality, but gaining and winning from it. The third aspect is creating climate resilient communities. And their important role lies within local governments who are already in the process of greening their spatial plans and development plans. And here the national level is also providing coordinated support. We have created a contact point at the Ministry of Climate, which coordinates all the municipalities in Estonia in communication with the government and state level in terms of all the questions related to green economy or climate actions. To better provide information, support, and to really facilitate the local level in this transition. And as I also mentioned, the public sector role is crucial. No matter what it's, whether it is the state level, it has its own role, but also local level through public procurements. How we give our natural resources to use for private sector, but also showing example by using or moving away from fossil fuels and showing directions through spatial planning. But what we also see that maybe needs a bit more support is how to bring this green development and in its needs together with local governments' ambitions and planning, and how they vision their development is through, for example, spatial planning. At local governments would be interested in welcoming new industries in their territories, or windmills in their territories. There we see a clear need for closer communication and cooperation with state level, with local government level, but also with private sector.
Thank you. Thank you for outlining Estonia's priorities and also the engagement with local stakeholders. Now, Mr. Liirandeni, you are here sitting and representing the Ministry of Environment of Sri Lanka. And I have for you the same question that I have just asked to Estonia, which, let me repeat, is what are the climate action priorities of Sri Lanka? And also what was the multi-level climate processes that led to the definition of these priorities?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Yes, Sri Lanka is one of a vulnerable country in the tropics. So we are one of an island nation. So, I mean, a lot of different vulnerabilities are there. Sea level rise, saltwater intrusion, flooding, long-lasting droughts in some areas in the rice zone where most of our staple food comes from the rice. So, I mean, the well-focused deliberate climate action is needed. So what are we doing is, since we have become the party to UNFCCC, and somewhere around 2017 we became a party to Paris Agreement. So our major intervention is that INDCs, and they converted later into the NDC. So for all 9 adaptation sectors and 6 mitigation sectors and loss and damage. So in 2017, we have composed our NDC action plan and the implementation plan in 2022. So now all those are in action. So I mean, we alone didn't develop that. So it was a multi-stakeholder intervention and their engagement. You know, a lot of different sectors: health sector, agriculture sector, industry sector, tourism sector. All those different sectors contributed to develop this NDC plan. And so it is there, the action plan and the implementation plan is there. Nowadays, we are preparing for NDC 3.0 to be submitted by 2000 next year, February 10. So NDCs, there are some governance structures because, you know, we are working with the sectors because, you know, industry sector has their priorities to increase the industrial output. I mean, they don't worry about the greenhouse gas emissions, although we are worried about that. So what happened is that we want our thing to be done by in their sector. So their sector, if that is vulnerable, our economy is vulnerable. So we have to save our people also. So what we happen to do is that there are committees. So the one is the top committee, co-chaired by our secretary. That is the National Steering Committee. Our secretary and the respective line ministry secretary. Suppose for the industry NDC sector and our environment secretary co-chair. Environment, health, tourism likewise. So those are the top level industry. Yeah, I mean sectoral coordination is there. We have the focal point in each sector. Also, likewise, we do implementation, monitoring, and all the things there. Likewise, so progress monitoring is also there. So that is the national level NDC implementation monitoring, and the other one is the national adaptation plan. Also has the similar structure because we are one of a vulnerable nation, and at the same time we are in the tropics. So adaptation is so very much important. That doesn't mean that we are not worried about decarbonization. We have done our best to to keep our mitigation sectors, all 6 mitigation sectors, under our control. So one of a decarbonization project is going on, but still we are having some measures so that adaptation is also equally important. There are some important core benefits from the adaptation also. So then, you know, in 1987, I mean, I am going to explain you what are the subnational level of our intervention. Our national adaptation plan is there. So what we have done is that in 1987, there was a major constitutional amendment those days. So they have introduced the 13th amendment. So that gives us subnational entities so that they are also partially independent things. Those are called provinces. We have 9 provinces. So these provinces has different vulnerabilities. Some are there in the drought prone area. Some are in the floodplain. Some are having landslides. So we have a very long coastal belt. So the sea level rise and subsequent saltwater intrusion is also there, very much important. So what happened is that we asked them, provincial administration, so why you are not integrating climate concerns into provincial development planning? So then what they have done is that they have prepared respectively provincial adaptation plans. Nowadays they have been validated. So we have, I mean, having a plan is not enough. So there should be a body to implement those things. So we have 9 different provincial climate boards and provincial climate units. And so we have one of so these are different governance structures. I mean, governance means that as a means of implementation, we have had different programs to provide them with technologies, transfers and development and the climate finance options and capacity building. So not only we prepare these climate boards, but we equip them with different methods. And we have climate smart village program and some cities program also there. So thank you very much. I just very briefly, but you can ask more explanations in question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. And then it was very interesting how you highlighted that obviously for a country like Sri Lanka, adaptation is fundamental, but we should not forget about mitigation too. So let me go to our next speaker, Joško Klidović. You are sitting here representing the municipality of Zagreb, your city, but also the Committee of the Regions. So I have a question for you, which is, what are the priorities of the Committee of the Regions when it comes to local climate adaptation, and how can we strengthen the role of subnational governments in climate action?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. These are very complex questions, I have to say. But first, to explain what is European Committee of Regions. It's an institution where all of us, more than 1 million locally elected politicians gather. Obviously, not all of us can come in one conference room. So we choose among ourselves nationally who will represent our local communities, local authorities, European Committee of Regions. So when we gather there, obviously there are different positions. There are people coming from big cities, developed countries, and people from rural areas representing less developed municipalities. So what we're trying to do is to find the lowest common denominator, because we want our voice to be heard in the decision-making process. And that's nationally as well as within European Union. So that's what we do. We are basically screening European legislation drafts before it comes to Parliament or European Council. And we are providing our own opinions on these drafts. We wish that these opinions impact in a positive way the legislation. The European Commission, who is usually taking initiative and proposing laws and regulations, is listening to us and even coming to us or inviting us to speak to them in this preparation phase. This is very important to us because we realized how the whole system is sick, and we developed SICK formula to fix it. And SICK goes for simplification, integration, and collaboration. Simplification in the context of the EU means there are too many laws, too many reporting systems which are conflicting, and that creates a big burden and problem for us, because you can't really report on one initiative, one thing, on the other initiative, the other thing, on the third one, completely third thing, and have different goals. And you are just one local authority who should implement all three, but they are conflicting. And you have a big problem, on the ground to implement it. So we ask for simplification. Then we ask for integration. We need to implement all kinds of policies, health policy, economic policy, financial policy, climate policy, energy policy, transport policy, all kinds of policy. They're not really coherent. Again, they're conflicting. And then what you're going to implement? It's a great problem, and everybody is, kind of criticizing you that you didn't implement this or that sectorial policies. Of course I didn't, because they are conflicting. I need to choose between health policy, let's say, and agricultural policy, financial policy, and climate policy. So everything must be coherent and reconciled. So that's integration of policy, to break silos. Silos create great problems for us, when we need to implement it. And then SIC, C is for collaboration. We can't do it alone as the local and regional authorities. Collaboration means multi-level governance. And this is one of the main points we are doing in climate policy as well. So we want to reach our national governments. They have authority to draft national energy and climate plans. They have authority to draft national determined contributions. They have big authorities, and they don't have responsibility to implement it. That responsibility lies on local and regional authorities. So what we say, dear government, please consult us before you, decide. And then we can say what works and what doesn't work in practice. Don't burden us with something we can't really implement. We don't have that capacity. Financial capacity, we don't have enough skilled in personnel, make it easy, invite us. So in European Union, we have mechanism of consultations, but it doesn't work well because that mechanism is set in motion only on government initiative. When the government wants to talk to us, okay, we'll talk. When we want to talk to government, we can't ask for consultations. So our proposal in Committee of Region is to establish permanent consultative mechanism or platform with the government in every and each member state of the European Union, which can be set in motion not only by governments, but by us, local authorities, because we don't want to face anymore the situation we have been facing so long, and that is government shape the policy, set targets, and then comes to us at the very end of the process selling their product. We're not buying it. We're not buying it. We don't have money to buy it. We don't have people to buy it. We're not buying it. If you want a product which should be implemented by us, then involve us, engage us upfront from the very beginning in decision-making process. And that's what we are doing in the European Union. We try to do here globally, even on this conference, through local governments and municipal authorities framework. Now, this is the same. What I have been explaining is just European context, but this is global context is the same. We must be heard here in Baku, in Brazil, but we need to be heard at home in our own states because our governments are authorized to take decisions on national determined contributions, on climate plans, on everything. But if we are not heard, then we have a problem. So priority for COR, Committee of the Regions, is exactly that, to find the channel, establish the channel, to consult with the government on all these issues in order to implement it better, obviously. And then there is another very important priority. Since in the European Union, we have cities which are far more ambitious than our own governments, and they set the higher goals than national governments, they kind of they're connected. There are different initiatives. One of them is Covenant of Mayors, or Mission for 100 climate neutral cities by 2030. So these people, these mayors, get together, and we as a Committee of Regions are connected with them and trying to really push these best practices all over European Union. Because people want, and they are very keen on following successful patterns of behavior. So if you are successful, everybody is looking at you. How did you do it? I will follow that example. This is it. So that's what we are trying to do through these initiatives, gathering the most ambitious mayors and cities. And then, of course, everything is under the COR umbrella. Thank you.
Thank you, Josko. You have highlighted a very important problem, which is policy integration and harmonization. And clearly, this is pronounced in the European Union. So I have now a question for Marisund Litvait. So as you know, there are many academicians on this panel and in this event, and you're representing, in a way, academia and the Research Council of Norway. So my question for you is, where do you see the academic research funds going and academia in general? And how do you think that academia can support policymakers in the sense?
Thank you. It's a great question, and I'd just try to take it up a little bit before I go there, just to try to connect things. It's getting late, so I want to thank all of you for being here and sharing this session with us. I actually think this is such an important session. I think the urban focus is crucial, and I'm going to try to explain why. Now, and first of all, just let me also thank the researchers that have been on stage for sharing their very beautiful case studies, really inspiring. Thank you very much. And this is also my own research field, so that was just a lovely moment for me to listen to that. Now, the majority of people live in cities, so it's just so crucial that we solve these problems in cities. It's the best way to start. Now, why is that the best way to start? Because it's complex, it's very difficult, it takes interdisciplinarity, it takes integration, and we desperately need to showcase that it's possible. We need to showcase and also from that develop narratives so that people and voters can believe that it's possible. That it's possible to combine climate solution and reducing the greenhouse gas emissions and still keep trust and acceptance and creating good lives for people. Because unless we can show that that is possible, creating good lives for people, it's very, very hard to see how we're going to gain and maintain political support for it. That's what you're also stressing. So I think that's extremely important. So I think that climate action needs urban action because it's the best place to showcase this. And why is that? It's precisely because it's so complex. It's so condensed. It's everything so pinpointed in the city. So every challenge is sort of we're really put to the test. So it's a little bit of a sort of Frank Sinatra approach that if you can make it there, you can make it everywhere, if you understand what I mean. So I think that, and so I really think that from the funders' perspective, which is where so I'm circling towards that now. So from the funders' perspective, and we're one comprehensive research council in Norway, so we handle all the competitive funding from all the ministries, for all the research performing sectors. So we're really in a position where we can try to coordinate and make the most of all these connections and bringing the different actors together and taking that the road from new research results and into action to take that to increase the pace and take down that distance. So we're desperately now looking for the best ways of doing that. So that we can get, because time is of the essence. So I think that from a research funder's perspective, always thinking about how we can not only leverage what's going on in the universities, in the research sector, different research sectors, also in the business sectors which we also fund, but how we can bring people in, how we can bring the local communities in, how we can bring the local governments in, really work with the research questions, work with the framing, work with the calls, so that we can, take that distance and increase from result to use and increase that pace from the offset in the projects. This is what I want. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would like to thank our panelists and invite you to please take a seat in the audience. And yes?
Before doing that, I will ask you a challenging question and an even more challenging answer. Because I would like in one single word, because unfortunately we're running out of time, to tell me which thing do we need to start from in order to make local authority and national governments to work together. In one single word. Jakob, would you like to?
Could you repeat the question? Which what?
To implement this multi-level governance, there's so much needed. Where do we start from? What can bring together national governments and local authorities to increase climate action? Maria.
Have like 2 or 3 words?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just like to quote the researchers that were on stage. We need effective and just net zero policies and have to be affordable. They have to be affordable to the local governments and both the national governments and the international governments need to make sure that that happens. And that's why we're here. And the negotiations are looking for a collective finance action, the target for putting those mechanisms in place.
Thank you very much, Mike. Jakob?
In one word, public. In 2 words, public pressure. In one sentence, climate policy is not politics driven, it's science driven. And that should be understood by everybody. the public in the first place. We need assistance of our citizens to press government.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Laura? Yeah,
One
it's a
word
bit ambitious.
Yeah, too ambitious, but trying to keep it short. That maybe the key word is alignment. Alignment of policies at different levels, but also alignment of knowledge, capacities, roles. This is the key.
Thank you. Liv?
I mean, creating a platform for the local communities to have ownership feeling.
Thank you again very much to our panelists, and thank you for Patrizia for moderating. Now I will ask the next panelist to join us on the stage, starting with Rea Ranalde from UN Habitat, Sarantuya Zandaraya from UNESCO Intergovernmental Hydrological Program, Jan Kopernic from UNDP, Harry Neufeld from UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center, and Vittorio Negretto from University of Venice. And I would like to invite here on stage the moderator Manavakana from Sant'Anna School of Superior Studies.
Thank you, Nicola. Here I'm back again, and I know we are tired, it's late, we are hungry, but this is a very interesting session and it's not the end. So please keep your energy with us. So I would like to ask first question to Leah. What do you think the next step should be to enhance the role of cities in climate policies?
Thank you so much, and thank you for being here so late in the evening. Realize that we are between you and hopefully dinner afterwards. But to answer your question, I think Nicola already really well described the NDCs and why they matter. But just as a quick refresher reminder, why does it even matter that we talk about cities and NDCs? It sounds like a really simple question, and one that I once had the pleasure of debating for 3 hours, because the answer is maybe not as easy as it sounds. So 74% of the current NDCs could be stronger, could have stronger urban content. My favorite figure from the research that Nicola showed beforehand is that actually almost all of the NDCs say we need climate finance in order to turn our NDCs into reality. Almost none of them make a reference to urban climate finance. And if you've seen the report that was launched just a couple of weeks ago on urban climate finance needs, it says that just in developing cities in developing countries need more than 300 billion annually. Massive climate finance gap at the local level. So what can the NDCs and bringing cities in the NDCs do? For me, it's a hook. I like to refer to it as a hook. What is written in the NDCs, there is an opportunity for this to be implemented. When national governments go back home, hopefully there will be somebody saying, what is written in your NDCs? How can we work together? How can we support? But also how are you hopefully can we align our policies to make sure that we can implement these NDCs? And to link it to that finance question, it can also be a hook to attract finance at the city level and at the national level. So second part is what can be done? What can national governments do that say, okay, currently I'm not really reflecting on my cities, but I want to bring them into that conversation? Is first review previous NDCs, review where their national policies are, review where if they have national urban policies, if they have engagement strategies. As Nicola also mentioned, often there is an NDC that's not very strong on urban content, but there are phenomenal engagement plans for cities and climate action. But it's about bringing these together again with the opportunity to create that hook. So taking stock of where we are. Second thing,
dialogues, collaboration, seeing how this can be integrated, having conversations of what local governments can bring to the table and what they need from national governments in order to make that happen. Peer-to-peer learning opportunities, there's some great examples of NDCs that already have strong urban content. And then as a last thing is making sure that we can have these opportunities to touch base, to engage, to learn from one another, such as here at COP29. I always say this is one of the last moments that we'll have to really make sure that we can have the most ambitious and strong NDCs that are possible. In February, national governments, parties will have to have submitted their NDCs in theory. So this is really a moment where we can still have these conversations. And then as a last thing, really briefly, how can UN Habitat support? If you are right now wanting to review your NDCs, Nicola already mentioned it briefly. We will have a toolkit that will launch here at COP29 explaining how to get stronger urban content. I know there's similar toolkits that are being launched for other sectors. So there's a lot of information and wealth and knowledge coming out of COP29. And we also have capacity building workshops, really walking through what does it look like step by step, who are the different actors you need to involve. And we'll also have a couple workshops on this in person here, in case you really want to go into the topic here at COP29 in our pavilion, the Multi-Level Action and Urbanization Pavilion. Here to help, here to have these conversations. So please feel free to talk to me, and thanks so much for having me here on this evening, and back to you.
Thank you, Leah, for your wonderful answer and give the comprehensive detail of why cities matter. So now I would like to go to our next question to Jana. I'm sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, but as my colleague said, Colin, that nothing is perfect, so as my pronunciation, so please don't mind. I would like to ask you, what do you think the next step should be to enhance the role of cities in national climate policies, which is the same question that I asked before?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for this kind invitation. I think I would like to start to say that we're really at a pivotal stage. We're at the COP, right? We are at the point where global CO2 emissions account in the cities for over 70%, and half of the world population, or over half of the population, is calling cities home, cities, towns, or urban dwellings, whatever you want to call it. We're all there. And cities are also at the forefront of the climate change impact. At the same time, they are the change makers, they are the hubs for innovation, and they are homes for all of us, homes which we all want to belong to. So how do we enhance the role of the cities in the national climate policy? First, I would want to mention would be really enhancing or increasing policy and sort of a fiscal space for the city. Again, each country is different, and each country has a different government system for their own cities. But it's fair to say that closer to the ground you are, closer to the people you are, the more likely you are to make better decisions. And that includes also climate change. So giving flexibility, also including financing, and giving clear sort of a space to then implement what I would call place-based policies and climate policies on the ground is the direction we need to go. Second, and coming from UNDP, I need to mention it, it is climate finance and access to climate finance. This is what we have been preaching. This remains a priority for UNDP to support the countries around the world. How do we make use of municipal bonds? How do we ensure that there are sufficient incentives for the cities to act in a certain way, and for the people who live in there to act in a certain way? It's really important. UNDP, for instance, and I'm covering Europe and Central Asia, just to give example. For instance, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we have been working with the governments of Bosnia and Herzegovina to support them coming forward with a sustainable energy and climate action plan. But not only that, at the UNDP, we want to take it farther. So we are supporting them with accessing different donors, different partners to make them happen. It is important to connect the dots and sort of also move from planning and policy to giving them a hope and a vision that then they can really be financed and implemented. The second thing is really, I would say, formalization of city representation in national climate planning, so to say. And what I mean by that, UNDP has supported, I think, around 85% of all developing countries in the previous round of the NDC revisions. And we have to say that it was not necessarily a trend that the city representations, municipality representations were part of the process. However, now in the most recent round, we are seeing that this has been changing. So there is a positive change. But I want to also echo what we heard previously and in the other panel and also from my panel colleagues. It's about peer-to-peer learning. It's about creating national, international, regional, whatever the grouping is, going beyond sort of a national platform for exchange. So that is another important element. Third one, I would say, is about data. And of course, we are here all aiming for climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation. But how do we measure it? What is the metrics? What's the methodology? How do we go about it? And is each country defining its own? Most likely, yes, right? Within the EU, there might be some more alignment. As soon as you exit, I would say, even the neighboring countries, which we are trying to help in the Western Balkan, you have already different metrics slightly on how would they measure and how they would approach. So this is an important element there. And the last point to mention, I would say, is also innovation. And how do we sort of trigger innovation in a way that it is bringing all stakeholders on the ground together? The cities need to feel that they are not alone in the struggle, and they are not alone also to address the climate goals that we're all in for. We need to encourage public-private partnerships. We need to see how to incentivize innovative solutions. To give you examples, for instance, in Serbia, UNDP supported the government Ministry of Environment to launch innovation challenges and incubation of ideas coming from private sector, from municipalities, NGOs, academia, to put forward innovative solutions, promoting low carbon solutions, but also climate resilience. So I would really encourage you to check our website in case you want to see some of them. Some are really high tech, some are digital, some are really grassroots solutions that were put forward. And another thing, another example to mention would be Moldova. We have also supported what is called Green City Lab, which is a sort of a structure or an entity that has been established in the capital city of Chisinau with the agenda or with the mandate to really promote low carbon development in the city and operate in the space of energy efficiency, renewable energy, transport, and look for the new solutions as a sort of interlocutor between the municipality, the private sector, and others. So we need to think out of box. It's all about bringing new types of solutions, maybe sometimes creating a new structure. Again, not every city wants too many new entities and creating chaos, but we need to really see how to connect the dots and how to give urban voices sort of prominence.
Thank you. That was actually quite difficult for me to put it in words, but thank you for putting out the emergency, like we need to act fast in cities too. And going back to the next topic, which is the most fundamental thing in our life is water. And I would like to ask Sant'Anna about going back to the national climate policies. Another global challenge is water, as we know. How do you see the role of water in national and urban climate action?
Thank you very much. Good evening. Representing UNESCO, I'm very pleased to hear some of the comments from the previous panel speakers about highlighting the role of science and also highlighting the role of researchers, formulation of the policy, national policies. But I would like to bring here a very different dimension of climate change, and that is water. And actually, climate change and water are interesting. And climate change that we are talking about are actually primarily a water crisis, because climate change impacts are manifested through water problems. And it not only impacts water resources in terms of quality, availability, and water-related disasters, which means risks to human health, the economies, and to lives of people, but also it poses risks to other sectors such as food security, ecosystems, biodiversity loss. So water should be at the center of climate discussions as well as climate negotiations, because without focusing on water, we cannot make the transition to climate neutrality. So water should be part of the solution and part of the discussions. And as it is important also the role of local governments, because the Paris Agreement is the global commitment, and it's translated into national policies, but its implementation lies with the local authorities and local levels. So we have to engage local authorities in both formulation of policies, which I really agree with the previous speaker from the Zagreb, and also in the implementation of policy. So why water is important is also because water is a connector, a climate connector in different sectors and between different stakeholders, allowing for better coordination and collaboration among different sectors, as well as trade-off between different sectors. For example, with the water scarcity, prolonged droughts, there is a question between how to allocate water rights between agricultural users and the cities. And that's where we have to bring together different stakeholders or different sectors to find solution to address a common problem of climate change. So for that reason, we are working together with the UNESCO Center on Urban Resilience at the Southern Denmark University to highlight the importance of water-centered action, both for mitigation, for adaptation, as well as for resilience, and engaging local governments. And with that, we are making assessment of national NDCs with regard to the focus on urban water issues in terms of how action in cities, water-based action in cities can contribute to mitigation, for example, because it is possible and it has been demonstrated technologically and economically that, for example, water treatment facilities can be carbon neutral and can even be energy positive, because we can recover energy from wastewater treatment plants, and that can also be more than sufficient for the use of those facilities. Water action and challenges are also central to climate change adaptation and enhancing resilience of cities. So for that reason, we are also looking for as a next step to look for champion countries or champion cities, which can showcase how urban water action and challenges can be a part of the next round of NDCs formulation. And for that, we would be happy to explore further opportunities to develop some case studies with some local authorities in this regard, especially for such, for example, Zagreb, what they mentioned about the integration. That's what we're talking about. So integration through water and through cities can be a very good example. So, or what also has been mentioned by the previous panel speaker about the water, how to incorporate water-related disaster risk reduction in the climate policy. So with this, I would like to ask the negotiators also in the negotiations to bring, to put more focus on water, both in mitigation as well as a tool for adaptation.
Thank you for your answer. So we have talked about NDCs, cities, and water in cities. So now we are going back to the topic, which is the hot topic right now. And my question to Henry is, the adaptation report has been recently published. Given the presentations we have seen today, what key insights can you add? And what is the road ahead for countries and cities from your perspective?
Thank you. So here's the report. We launched it on Thursday last week. Adaptation Gap Report every year. We bring this to the community, discussing, negotiating here at COP. What's going on in adaptation planning, implementation, finance. This year, we also focused very much on capacity building and technology transfer. As part of the means of implementation in the negotiations here at COP. Now, normally we focus on the Global South. Most of our analyses focus on the Global South, in particular finance, but also planning and implementation. Strangely, there is more and better information at the global scale in aggregated form from developing countries than there is about these kind of questions from the global North. That is because at least in the past, when it comes to adaptation, much of the action has not been communicated in ways that we can access that information in easily accessible forms, whereas the OECD publishes a lot of information on climate finance that we can access, that we can analyze, and that we use regularly. But now this year, we also, for the very first time, used a new data source, which is the Carbon Disclosure Project. Now, while this comes from the mitigation side, they also have a strong focus on adaptation now. That is, this focuses on urban action. So everything we've heard so far about the NDCs, which is really important, and it's encouraging to hear that there is progress in that area, has to do with what cities plan to do. What we're looking at here is what cities are doing. So we analyzed more than 3,500 actions disclosed by urban centers, which represent roughly 25% of all cities larger than 1 million inhabitants. There are regional differences because, I don't know, Europeans and North America, but also Latin American cities report much more strongly than Asian and African cities. However, we're able to make some recommendations or draw some conclusions from this report that are valid across all global regions. So we look at and I'm going to break this down by hazards, responses, and co-benefits. These are three key indicators that we looked at in order to understand how cities are acting upon climate change, or in terms of responses, in terms of their adaptation. So very clearly in all regions, flooding and heat are the top two hazards that they look at. Droughts are third, and storms, it depends which regions and cities we're looking at are following. Other hazards are also mentioned, of course, but to a lower degree. But very clearly, floods and heat are the key hazards that cities have to adapt to. Second point, how are they responding? And here, very clearly, technological engineering responses are at the top. That is, building sea levees or other forms of mechanical responses. But second in response are nature-based solutions already. And that's also a good sign, I think, that we can see. Then in third place, we find a lot of capacity building and sort of behavioral actions that cities implement, such as planning for disasters, which is also a good sign, I think. Governance responses are also very, very important, regulatory responses. Not surprisingly, after what I've heard from Colin, economic responses sort of that look at more national level policy-making responses that incentivize behaviors aren't at all important at the local level. And in terms of the co-benefits that these actions bring, all cities report co-benefits very strongly, and at the top is health. So health co-benefits of adaptation actions really are the most important ones. Social benefits, job creation, ecosystem services are also always at very high levels. So what we can see is that urban centers acknowledge the benefits of adaptation action, not only for adaptation to reduce climate risks, for exposure reduction or reduction of vulnerability, but also economic, social, and environmental benefits. greenhouse gases or sort of mitigation elements are also mentioned, but at a much lower level than I had anticipated, actually. So those are the key findings from this part of the report, and I encourage all of you to read it. I can't, I don't want to say more than what's already been said. I'd be repeating myself in terms of all of the issues that we need to address when bringing together national level planning and implementation with local level action and planning. I think there is a large disconnect that needs to be bridged here. Sort of vertical integration, I think, is the term that we find very, very important to address in work that we do at UNEP Copenhagen regarding the enhanced transparency framework and being able to assess progress towards plans and implementation. And we've been doing a lot of work on this vertical integration because it's so critical. And I'll stop here for now and have more to say maybe later. Thanks.
Thank you, Henry, for the answer. I can say briefly that gap are really, really big. And now we have listened to almost different actors. We have to go back to academia again. And I would like to ask Vittore, where do you see the academic research funds going? And how do you think academia can support policymakers in this sense or in this manner in general?
Thank you, Manav. Yes, I'm bringing the perspective of academia and from also the European perspective. So this is the world I live. I work as a research manager at the UF University of Venice, and what the research I see is the applied research. So it's already where research bodies also work with local and regional governments and with society and with practitioners, and it's already a part of research, but it's applied on the territory. And an interesting trend that I've seen is, for example, in the Horizon Europe research framework for example, and it's also in their missions, the adaptation mission or the 100 neutral cities mission that was previously mentioned, is that they're really emphasizing results to be tangible, to be visible, to be measurable somehow, and spread as much as possible across the territories. So this has been mentioned before with by the colleague Mari about the increasing pace of the applied research, of getting to the ground, and I feel that this push reached not just from the Horizon, but it reached all other types of funding lines, for example. And one thing that I've noticed, at least, is that it's moving beyond the realization of exceptional large-scale demonstration projects, and it's trying to get, which are obviously still needed, but it's also trying to bring in the solutions, trying to integrate adaptation, for example, in the ordinary practice of local and regional governments. So in a way that moving from the exceptional and trying to make adaptation the new norm. And in research that I've seen, this is very interesting. It goes through a cost and benefit analysis, for example, but not just from the economic point of view, but also environmental, the society. So bringing in all the dimension of this type of action, and also the compatibility with the specific context in which research is applied and the solutions are applied. And I see through this, and the academia in this plays a role of speaking with, obviously, and helping policymakers in taking decisions, and in also elaborating standards, for example, and helping to have measurable indicators that speak the language at the national level or can be reported in the Carbon Disclosure Project. So to be measurable at all scales, and translate what is local adaptation towards also the higher level. Thank you.
Thank you, Vittore. We always say universities are underfunded, so we have to see where the fund is available and how we can tactically and strategically apply to those fundings to have positive impact. And with this, I would like to conclude the session, but it's not the end because Nicola will give you a challenge.
Thank you very much, Manev. Also for you, the challenge in one word, where do we start? Where do we start to raising the ambition of local climate action, national climate policies through multi-level governance? Please.
Recognition of shared challenges, because that's a starting point. If we realize we're all on the same boat, if we realize that we're facing similar issues across different sector cities, this will be an incentive for us to start.
Thank you. Please, Senator.
Well, I would like to highlight the role of science, of being the UN organization for the education, science, and the culture, because science is essential to make informed decision making and science evidence-based decision making, and especially in the fields related to climate change, because everything about the climate change is forward-looking in terms of its impacts and in terms of its responses. And also to highlight that the next IPCC special report will focus on climate change and the city. So science is going to be really playing.
Thank you. Leah, please.
It's tough. My colleagues here on the left already took two of the things that I thought about. So I'll add a third one, which is money, money, money. I think we already spoke about the urban climate finance gap to really make sure we can build on our cities effectively as partners in crime in this climate crisis, and making sure that more climate finance is going to cities will be critical, and also making sure that we can't just multiply money, but making sure that the money that we have is being used efficiently, effectively to help cities and work with and in cities.
Thank you. Henry?
Okay, so finance being taken on. I'll talk.
You can repeat the same one.
So I'll talk about finance plus capacity and technology transfer. Capacity building and technology transfer are key means of implementation. Finance is critical, but without these other two means of implementation, the effectiveness of our actions is going to go down, way down. Thanks.
Vittore?
And I will say, of course, I agree with all the points, and I will say also as a one-word indicators as a way to measure and meet the targets at a higher level, but also allow finance to reach the right point, not just in quantity, but also in quality.
Thank you very much to our panelists. Allow me just 1 minute for a few closing words. The next 2 weeks see very important topic on the agenda. We need to take decision about finance, particularly finance for loss and damages, finance for adaptation, the global goal for adaptation. We need to enhance transparency mechanism, making clear that what is stated in our national policies become action, and to monitor the impact of it in a clear and again transparent manner. We are working on strengthening the implementation for adaptation and mitigation of the entire Paris Agreement, and to empower all national and local authorities to do that. We are knowing the challenges, we know all the difficulties to implement it, yet we shall strengthen our work and action. Though on the positive side, I can see that bringing together 15 speakers and panelists tonight, representing national governments, representing local authorities, bringing together in between the UN programs and agency, UN as one, in action, and academia, practitioners and policymakers together, it's a good starting point to strengthen the multi-level governance and jointly to raise the ambition of climate policies and climate action. Thank you very much to our speakers, our panelists, and to the audience to bear with us until this late today. Thank you.